Too late.
All right, so here, come to the front. Yeah. Like, all right.
Hybrid meetup.
All right, guys. So yes, welcome to this meetup of the Radical Exchange Swiss Chapter. We're here in Zurich, in this really nice loft place at the Trust Square. People are still coming in, and this is a bit of an experiment, I have to admit, because this is the first time we're doing a hybrid in this, a real true hybrid. So I think what we'd like to do is, if people online want to say something, please raise your hand and make use of the chat function. That's going to be the easiest. Also, if you have questions, and we'll try to work off that. And I think actually one thing I want to do before we get started with the meetup is introduce the new co-lead of the chapter. So those of you who've been here before know Sebastian, who was doing this with me. Sebastian has run off to the United States, to Providence, Rhode Island, and and left me all by myself. So one day I ran into Charles, a fellow New Yorker here in Zurich, and it was clear, right? So you want to introduce yourself?
No, it's very funny because actually it's 13 years ago to the day that I arrived to live in Switzerland. It's very interesting anniversary. So, and, so whatever that means, it's packed. And but I'm very glad to be living here, and also just to be here with in the room, as well as those joining online. And I don't know, I don't want to take up time to talk about me. It's really about us, and it's about what we're going to talk about. And one of the things is that some of us just met and connected further at this event that took place in this very building for the last 3 days. And so we might as well just at least touch on that, acknowledge the amazing energies and conversations and so forth. So whoever wants to pick up on that, maybe anyone could take it.
So yeah, I've asked already twice, but
Steve's here. Hi, Steve.
Hello.
Steve, grab a seat and get on camera.
It's Adrian.
I say just fine. There. Adrian, grab a seat.
Adrian, not Steve.
So I have an idea of that piece. So
there are people in the
As you
video.
like.
Okay.
I just because I'm feeling the energy and the momentum.
on it.
Just on top of it.
Hi, people click on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Michael's here. Hi, Michael.
All right. So like Charles was saying, we're here after the 3 days of the Decentralized Identity Conference Europe, the first one here in Zurich. It was very, very cool. So we're all riding on the energy of that. And should we do the go around the room thing?
Yeah. So well, do you want to introduce me? Who am I? Why am I here?
You know, I was asking myself that very question.
That's right.
So let me introduce our special guest, who probably needs no introduction, Kaliya Young, identity woman, who's was one of the drivers of this great conference, as of so much other stuff. And welcome, and thanks for taking the time after 3 long days and flying across the ocean and God knows what, to spend your Friday evening here.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun. And yeah, the theme of the evening, I guess, is around identity and digital identity in the age of generative AI. Is that the title? Yeah. Okay. And so one of the things that I like to do, we used open space technology to facilitate the digital identity on Conference Europe. And within open space, you host different sessions. And I really like to start off open space sessions that I run by asking everybody around the room to share in one short sentence why they came, what was compelling about being here, or what drew them here. And so for folks online, we don't quite have, oh, look, there's 2 Steves.
Which one's the AI Steve and which one's the real one? Well, you can't tell.
I've always found one Steve more than enough.
That's what I'm always asking all the time.
I would love it for the folks online to type their answer to that question and we can read them and we'll just quickly go around this table and it'll help us sort of shape the arc of the conversation. So I'll start off with you, if you can share your name and why you came tonight.
Zurich, yeah, I'm totally happy about the RadicalxChange Swiss Chapter, and I'm especially generously interested in meeting pioneers. So identities are broad, but my prime motivation was that you are like many in the room actually, from world leading pioneers in their field, and
Great.
that gives me energy and motivation to carry on my own kind of pioneering stuff. So
Excellent.
pioneering is my mind.
That's your thing. Okay,
Meet
great.
as many pioneers as I can.
Thank you. Why did you come, Richard?
Out of curiosity, basically,
Curiosity, I love that.
which is a normal ingredient every day.
Yeah. Anastasia.
I can always listen to you talk at any time. That's one reason. Second reason, for those of you who don't know, I run a foundation that's focused on future of governance. And so digital identity and of course, generative AI is a huge part of the future of governance. So endlessly interested in all of these matters.
Mhm.
That's right.
Well, my name is Martina. I was already here, to be honest. I attended DICE over the past, almost 4 days. And generative I is, a very interesting topic that I also am a little bit associated with, and in combination with SSI, digital identity, I think it's things we definitely should talk about. So I'm happy to be here and to meet all of you and all of you online. And it's my first RadicalxChange meetup. So I don't know what I am going to expect, but
Oh, yeah.
we'll see.
What is RadicalxChange?
Yeah, exactly.
Why are we here in the world? What's RadicalxChange? We're diving in right into the deep end. Hi, everybody.
That's what I meant with curiosity.
Yeah. I'm Dimitri. I'm here in Zurich because of DICE, because I'm a huge fan of IAW and open spaces. And when I heard there was going to be one in Europe, I'm like, I can't miss this. And then I hear at the meetup because I've heard of RadicalxChange, but I want to know more. So also curiosity.
Okay, great. That's good.
I can say a tiny bit more, and Tom's back, so I was gonna mention this. Yeah, we're sort of putting logistical things here, but so I had this idea to do this meetup because Kaliya is in town, and to be a bit crass, take advantage of Kaliya being in town, but more deeply. But no, to this conversation, I think we're going to dive deeply into is critically important and one of my driving passions now, more and more, and I'm kind of really filled from the last days conversations as well. So yeah, there's more, but the thing I wanted to mention in terms of my coming in with Tom to do more activity in Switzerland RadicalxChange is this theme or related themes will be a continuing or ongoing conversation, maybe series of some kind. So it's just emerging, but it's not a one-off. Okay.
Hey, I made it. For me, the topic is interesting because as a content creator, I see huge opportunities, and as a specialist in AI and digital identity, I see huge threats, and I want to learn more about both of them.
Yeah,
Sorry, just to clarify, you see digital identity and AI as both huge threats?
Like the combination, basically AI, like the combination, there are like a lot of threats, but there's also a lot of opportunities.
Right, okay.
I'm Dimitri Dimi, friend of Jörg. I'm a founder of Architecture, it's a PropTech startup for democratization of properties. Basically, and the digital identity plays a huge role in this next step of how we find space to live, to occupy, and so on. So now this is kind of like a critical point. How people like funding or putting spaces on the network.
Yeah.
Great, so I'm Tom. I'm here, one, because I co-lead this chapter and put this together. I'm also here because I'm a communications person, and since the AI explosion, I've had to just let somebody in here. But you know, I know this touches on almost pretty much everything I do. I'm also keen to talk about AI alignment because RadicalxChange is getting very much involved in AI alignment topics. How can we get sensible laws and regulations around AI? And of course, it was a fantastic opportunity with Kaliya in town to have her join us.
Cool. You do the thing where you make the chat be higher. I don't know, you'll figure it out.
Remove the.
No, he has to leave the participants so we can keep letting them in, but you can make the
No, I
chat.
don't actually, because it comes on the screen.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there, okay. And me, I'm here because you guys invited me. Thank you. And I actually, in terms of, maybe I can talk more after we read what our online people said. So Michael said, I'm here particularly concerned about the non-consensual confiscation of identity identifiers, IP, and the incorporation of them into commercial models and the capitalization of them without compensation. Steve said he's working with Green Check and writing a white paper on how to estimate humanity using Bayes rule. Okay, we want to hear more about that. And Juan is curious about digital identity and the upcoming challenges to verify the authenticity of all telecommunications. That's a great topic to touch on. So if anyone else online wants to type why they chose to come to this meetup, we'd love to hear, because we heard all the people here. Authenticity of communications. This is a big deal. This
Yes, Ray.
The network endpoints.
Ray writes, you see better than I do.
Building purpose-driven contracts as the meaning layer of our socio-techno systems designed to answer why we ultimately do what we do. Purpose is the ultimate expression of agency and thus core to identity. How do we construct identity that's core to how we make meaning in relationships with each other? So this is always what happens when you talk about identity, is the philosophical shows up. So we welcome it. And our community regularly engages with it. So that's good. I think folks, some of the folks in the room are unfamiliar with RadicalxChange, and we're hoping that they could learn more about it. So maybe we could start off with like a pretty time box kind of explanation.
Yes, so in one or two sentences, RadicalxChange is a movement that started with a book by Glenn Weil and Eric Posner back in 2018, I think it was, called Radical Markets, which was looking to use. I think about it as, you know, using market forces in innovative ways just to solve societal problems, and out of that came bunch of ideas. One of them that's very, very well known, especially in blockchain space, is quadratic voting. Then quadratic funding came out of that. There are other ideas about the data as labor was one chapter back then.
Yeah.
There was a new
The
approaches to
SALSA.
antitrust stuff, and then there was the self-assessed. I was forgetting SALSA and cost, but
It's like a
it's
property tax scheme where you declare the value of the property to you and you pay taxes based on that.
Yeah.
But if anyone else wants to buy it for that price, you must sell it for that price.
Interesting.
So then you have to think about the value of it to you. And
Yeah.
that's actually that's an olderish idea. There's been other ideas like that in the world, but that was the original ideas, and then it kind of evolved. And the book got picked up by Vitalik Buterin, the founder of Ethereum, and Vitalik and Glenn became quite friendly, and they worked on some of the ideas and came up with the quadratic funding. And Vitalik is on the board of the RadicalxChange Foundation. And yeah, that's pretty much and we have chapters all around the world. And in the foundation and in the States. So
And also, like,
you've been quite involved, right?
Yeah, relatively speaking, I think I ended up actually writing a series of paper blog posts. I mean, they were so long with Glenn. And I didn't know who he was when I started redlining these papers, these blog posts about identity. And by the time I was finished, I was like, please include me as a co-author on these posts. So that was a great, like just intellectually engaging and stimulating process. That was fun. And I actually live sort of walking distance from Matt in Oakland, California, the president of RadicalxChange. And then I go to their week or their monthly community calls. There's always new interesting ideas and things flowing through this network that are really getting at, I don't agree with everything, but at least they're thinking differently about how to shift underlying structures that have not, at least at this point in our human history, aren't really serving us. And I've always been, my undergraduate degree is in political economy and human rights in the make up your own major at UC Berkeley. So I've always had this political economy streak. So that really also spoke to my kind of interest. And then I'll maybe I can share a little bit about what I think digital identity is and how it relates to AI. I think there's always this question of like, we're humans in these bodies, and who we are as people is so much more complex than anything that could be expressed digitally, right? And so in order to interact in the digital world, humans created a this tooling that's really rudimentary, right? And the first tooling was really usernames and passwords, and we're still barely getting away from that. But in order to act in the digital world, you have to have an identifier that is in a digital form that other digital things can connect to you with. And the sort of first identifiers that we were using to do that were one within just one system, having messaging between different parties on the same system on these like 1960s mainframes at universities. And then when they plugged in the internet, it was like, oh, well, if you're on one mainframe and you want to talk to someone else who's connected to another mainframe on the other end of this network, email became proto-email, and then the actual email protocols were invented. And we're still sort of in that paradigm. And then we created like accounts on these social systems, and we had handles and usernames, and AOL, you could have 5 handles that were all potentially separate behind the scenes, separate in public, but AOL knew you owned those 5 handles, right? So even then they were like playing with this idea of digital persona, that you didn't have to have everything linked to like the one you. And I think, so that's when we're talking this topic of digital identity, sort of, that's kind of was the starting point that the community that I have stewarded along with other people here, like Dimitri stewards parts of the community too. We were coming in like 2005 and being like, how could it work better? How come I have to get identifiers assigned to me by corporations or my company that I work with or government? Why should they be assigning me identifiers in the digital world? How could I have some kind of internal autonomy of like controlling that identifier? And then from that, turns out that's really technically hard. If you ask me and Phil and Doc, who we co-founded the Internet Identity Workshop with, like in 2005, if we would still be meeting 18 years later, barely, like no. But I think despite this, I'm really optimistic about where we've come to, right? Like I think we now have the core building blocks have been defined enough that we can go, okay, those are probably going to be the winners. Now, exact flavors of those building blocks, not so clear yet, but the protocols that we worked on, one of them is basically achieves that goal of where you have an identifier that you generate yourself. You don't get assigned it by outside parties. And you can express it in several different forms. And you can also, with that identifier type, which is called a decentralized identifier, can broadcast out to the world public keys associated with it. So now you have an identifier, you also have public keys, and then you have potentially also an endpoint, right? So that autonomy, that decentralization, we've like achieved. And then you also have the who are you problem, which is not solved by really random long numbers with public keys. And who are you is largely determined by who other people think you are and who other institutions think you are. And so that's where like the verifiable credential standard comes from. So hopefully those, if you're watching online and you want to look those things up, that's a lot of what we've talked about in our community. Joyce is here too, all these friendly faces online. It's great.
I wanted to just drop in, like, I think Tom, you made a reference before to, and maybe even before we started, to plurality and also collective intelligence project. And I think maybe just to reference like these sort of sister organizations to RadicalxChange. And I'm still learning, coming into it a little more deeply now myself, but all of these communities, networks, and so on are also quite interested and concerned and kind of energizing these conversations as well. So maybe just a way to broaden the scope of
Well, I think,
also
yeah,
inviting. Yeah.
I think because there's these tracks, right? There's the philosophical track and are these things alive and et cetera, that there's the regulation and societal track, but there's also the technical track, which interested me. I mean, Dimitri, you spoke at the conference several times about SSI and AI, and you've been doing a lot of thinking about that.
Yeah.
I think we want to maybe bring some of that in more on a technical level.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'd love to talk about it. Yeah. So, so look, where to start, right? So I think we're all aware that generative AI can do some really impressive stuff, from writing essays to passing exams to creating images to creating video. And I think all of us have sort of realized, oh no, they can create like really realistic, lifelike video. What is that going to do to news? What is that going to do to politics? Right?
And we talked identity theft.
And what is that going to do to
We
identity?
talked about, right? Yeah.
Some of the generative AI can learn, can train on your voice and then reproduce it, right? So what are we going to do?
It can train on your voice in 3 seconds.
Okay, that's ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. So train on your voice, and then, right, so like when your grandma calls you, and is asking you for an emergency, but it's not really your grandma, what is the world going to do then, right? Like, so I think we're all aware of both the crazy promise of it, because on the one hand, what's it going to do with politics and identity theft and all these other things, but on the other hand, it's empowering all of us, right? It's making us more productive if we use it. It could be amazing personal assistance. It could be amazing like company assets and assistance. But of course, it can also put contract artists out of business. And also, so this constant theme of opportunity and threat is just incredible.
Yeah.
So coming from the momentum of this conference here, we've got some technical tools. And of course, when we have a hammer, everything's a nail, but really, like, we have really good tools that could help with both the promise and the threat of AI, right? We're getting better at provenance. It's still technically hard, but we can sign stuff and say, okay, this video or this voice or this letter came from such and such an entity. And it's not magic, right? It still doesn't solve the really hard social problems like identity verification, like, KYC, know your customer kind of stuff. We still have to interact as humans, and we still have to solve the hard social problems. But it allows us to leverage having solved those into better identity, better provenance. The other aspect, the thing that I constantly think about with the intersection of self-sovereign identity and AI is, of course, data. AI works on data, and the more powerful the AI, the more sensitive and intimate data it needs. So where's that data going to live? Is it going to live on OpenAI servers? Is it going to live on Microsoft servers? Right? Do we have a chance of having our own encrypted data servers on which we can select machine learning algorithms to train, and then the models can live in the same storage right next to the data, right? We have all these opportunities here. So that's kind of what I wanted to bring the conversation to.
Yeah.
You just made me think of something, and I hope I can express it coherently. But I was just thinking about this whole data question, right? Which we talked also about yesterday. And I was thinking, on a blockchain, transactions are theoretically anonymous or synonymous, but if you're clever and you can do a lot of forensics on it, you can figure out who is who and what's going on. So to what extent do you think when AIs get smart enough, they can start extrapolating from just our little public, stuff we're doing online that's actually kind of public and supposed to be kind of, on the side, but then they'll start figuring us out, right?
Yeah.
And
you're absolutely right. I haven't started thinking about that.
Yeah, that's
like, you're right. AI powered forensics and personal detective work, like, whoa.
Yeah, I mean, it's like all the nightmares we have now, just on jet fuel.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Do we want to, anyone here, and then we could open up some voices for some comments from online. But go ahead.
This part you've been talking for to allow personal data to the network. Are you talking about technologies, or are you talking about like the concept? Because there are some peer-to-peer, so you're talking about peer-to-peer technologies.
So I think,
or could you?
Sure. I could elaborate. What were you going to say?
Well, I think there's. You go and then I'll go.
So the way I think about it is we have some tools in our toolbox, and we can do a wide range of things with it, right? We can go really traditional and low tech, where it's like, here's my hard drive. Here, machine learning, go through everything in my hard drive and train on that, right? Or here's my Google Drive or Microsoft Cloud Drive, train on that, right? So that's like really basic, really familiar with everybody. So that's on one end of the spectrum, and the other end is the really radical peer-to-peer technologies that you're talking about, right? Where we can, like, if we have an interest group, we could say, okay, this part of my data server that has to do with radical markets, right? Like, I'm going to share this directory with everybody else, and we can have like a combined library, and we can have learning algorithms that travels between our data spaces and federates, right? So you can do lots of interesting things, starting from like very basic of like, hey, I got this thing, what can I feed into it? Well, here's my hard drive, well, here's my documents folder, right? To very advanced. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you're talking about peer-to-peer communication, but also ability to build some networks.
Yes.
That.
Yes.
Secure networks.
Yes.
Makes sense.
I mean, I ran a session. I'll share a thought, which is I ran a session at the Internet Identity Workshop in April. Really, that had two parts. One was like all of the things that AI is going to break, right? So you just need one that's really clear, which is voice. You can't actually trust a voice on the end of the telephone because someone could have captured the voice of your grandma and then like did a whole thing and got you to send the money, right? So it's breaking things, but it's also the tools in our community, particularly the decentralized identifier and verifiable credential standard, have a great potential along with other things that need to go with them, like trust frameworks and trust registries, and like to address those challenges too, right? Which is like when grandma calls, her actual phone is transmitting to your phone a verifiable credential that says, yes, it's grandma calling, right? And that this gets to one of the things that one of the online people said, which is like that the future of communication has much stronger authentication of who is actually on the other end, because you can't trust random identifiers or in the current network architectures as they are, because phone numbers can be spoofed, email addresses can be spoofed. But these protocols like DIDCOM with verifiable credentials have a much lower risk of being hijacked and sort of using spoofing on them. So
Anyone out there? Nobody's hand is up, but you're welcome to speak out. This room, if you like.
Steve, this is the type of sharing self-sovereign AIs we are building the structure. You want to talk a bit about that?
yeah,
Yeah, tell us more.
Tell us more.
Well, like I said, it's kind of implemented better at rewind.ai right now. But it's an Apple only product. But it seems to be pretty self-sovereign, you know, verifiable control by the user and so on and so forth of the AI that lives totally on their machine. But we are building the infrastructure for it in a wider kind of personal data locker solution that we'll be able to use for sharing self-sovereign AI or any other type of data that you have securely, you know, between users with no middlemen. So that's what we're doing over at Dazzletown.
Can you tell me what is this self-sovereign AI? It's like an agent.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So I thought we were talking before on the subject of, I guess I should put on my dumb video here. Since I had that, I'm making faces to you the rest of the time. All right.
Is that the real you or the other one?
Exactly. It's dangerous. Don't let me have these tools. Don't give the AI to me. All right. So yeah. So what was I just talking about now? Was it Dazzletown AI? Oh yeah. All right.
What's a
So
self-sovereign AI?
self-sovereign AI. So self-sovereign AI and the whole idea of you know, personal assistance and so on and so forth. I mean, it does have a tremendous potential, and I don't think that's one of the more dangerous applications of it. So I certainly think that people need to do that. We're trying over at Dazzletown, particularly to make sure that we have a process that we can assure that our organization is going to be responsive to the public in a way that corporations cannot be in the long term. So really more than any, there are some technical things that we're doing as well, but in any case. So the also thing is I wrote about alpha convince here as well, which is the idea that, you know, that these, even if we know that we're talking to a bot, they're going to still be super charismatic.
Right.
And so we have to be very careful about setting up our humanity verification systems such that when humans who are susceptible to bots don't end up verifying other bots that they know to be bots to be human and so on and so forth. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now, is to make a system where we can actually mathematically determine what reasonable estimates of humanity are, so that when we eventually do have human defectors, our existing verification systems don't implode.
what's a human defector?
In other words, someone who verifies a bot is human. A human who verifies who's working for the bots.
Oh, okay.
And this estimates of humanness, did you say?
Of humanity. In other words,
yeah. So is that based on behavioral stuff?
In a self-sovereign way. In other words, the user has total control over it.
Yeah.
In other words, you have the ability now to look at your network and the attestations of people in the network or various verification services of humanity, and make a personal estimate yourself of how much you think Bob is human. Is 99% or is it 99.9% that I just met on the internet? You know, so it's interesting, but it's, you know, frightening as well, obviously, to think about this stuff. So that's what I've been doing.
I think to be clear, a little clearer about what Dazzletown is doing, which is led by Johannes Ernst, who's an OG in the identity field. He's one of the original founders of the OpenID protocol itself
Okay.
that got itself started at the first Internet Identity Workshop in 2005. And he's really looking at building large scale personal data banks that can pull down all of the data you already have generated in the last 20 years of your digital life into a thing that's like controlled by you, and then supporting and like building the tooling for it. So he's slowly going through and like the tooling to pull your Amazon data down and your LinkedIn data down and your email archives down, et cetera, because you have to like get into the API and get it out. The good thing is we now have, well, you've had GDPR in Europe for a long time.
Yeah.
It gives you those rights, but we now have more, like CCPA in California also gives you these rights to access your data. They can't withhold it from you. And then thinking about like, once you have all that data, what do you do with it? He's been building like early prototype visualization tools, but you could also see like plugging in your personal AI on your own data in your Dazzle Town Locker, and like, how do we do that? I mean, that's, I hadn't really thought of that as part of this conversation, but it's really good thread.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And in fact, because these companies have to share their data, but they don't necessarily have to share it in a nice way. Often what you'll be able to download is a hot mess. And so what he's really developing now are sort of bots that sort of crawl over the data that kind of pull out the particular pieces they need for an application rather than trying to digest it whole, because it's always changing forms, and like to keep up with it, sort of building like, you know, an overall software structure like that would be impossible. So we have a new approach, which I think is going to be very nimble.
That's great.
I thought I would just drop in a couple of words on the philosophy side. I hope nobody minds. We started a little bit into it yesterday. I'm lost into it.
What is time? Right.
Well, yeah, so what is time and what is intelligence is one thing, and then what is, so therefore what's anything attached to intelligence, artificial, collective, and so on. So that's one piece. And then what is humanity, back on, you know, some of what Steve was riffing on, and where do we, and I was discussing with Richard just earlier, to tie in that conversation about, and I think it related to our conversation, Martina, last night about something like, well, here's where I got to is humanity has drifted from nature, and so can we sort of save the nature part of humanity? Maybe I'll leave it there, but I think there's no agreement really clearly around intelligence itself. So this whole AI, quote unquote, it's kind of like useless and meaningless, maybe, arguably. So there, we can go from there.
Yeah, I think the I mean, if you look into this stuff, people are arguing that, you know, first thing with AI is you argue about what does intelligence mean, and you go on and on and on about that. What's amazing about the whole generative stuff that's come out this year is that, intelligent or not, it gives a hell of a damn good illusion that it is. Except when it hallucinates, and then you're off in another space. So if it's not intelligent, it may not be self-conscious, right? But it has intelligence of a kind. There's you know, no doubt.
Oh, and sorry, just on that, because you said something yesterday very confidently, in a kind of a dismissive hand waving way, that it's not alive and it's not sentient. Period. You kind of made a clear statement. So that's an opinion, though.
Right.
And so, okay.
So I'm super excited about this. Usually I try to avoid conversations about what's intelligence, but randomly, like a couple days ago, I stumbled on this video that was by Michael Levin, called The Computational Boundary of the Self. And this guy turns out to be like a professor of, I don't know, molecular biology or something. Like he builds biorobots at one of the famous universities. But he has this concept of computational boundary of the self, of cognitive light cones. And it sounds, I know, it sounds fancy, but the reason I'm excited about it is he defined, hold on, I'll get to that. He defines, no. Like it's a concept from physics, and he sort of like plugs it and juxtaposes it with intelligence. But here's the thing. He defines intelligence very simply, just ability to set and achieve goals.
Yeah.
And he has this real spectrum from like bacteria to like all sorts of life forms, to humans, to groups of humans, to to, global internet minds. He talks about this expanding circle of capabilities. Obviously, I can't do the concept justice, but just the simple definition of intelligence as setting goals and then doing stuff, I find is really incredibly helpful, especially in the conversation about AI, because is the AI sentient and alive? I don't know, you're right, it is an opinion, but can it set goals and do stuff? Oh, yeah.
But that's exactly, yeah.
And we should pay attention, yeah.
So how is the goal measured? I mean, is it just a
So he-
computational goal?
well,
Like
he actually
trillions,
has-
tens of whatever?
Yes, I haven't gotten deep enough into his papers to answer that intelligently, but yes, it is measured.
Yeah, I just mean it's a difference whether you have an amount.
Let me give
to
you,
it.
let me give you an example. So he talks about size of the light cone, as in how far back can you remember and how far ahead you can plan. That's what he measures it
Okay.
with. So like a bacteria, he says, he's like, it is only dealing with, very immediate gradients of chemicals and like signaling molecules. Whereas like a dog is like, has a concept of its territory and of its pack and is trying to has memory, right? So it's got recollection of the past. Can it plan to very far in the future? No, not really. That's not its thing.
No, but the machine, I mean, computers are calculating stuff, right? So what about my goal is to be happy?
Okay.
What does it do then?
I think
Can it
that's
do that,
I think that's a
or-
larger conversation that we'll
Yes.
room for.
Absolutely, but the point is it measurable, like in numbers or not, what he's talking about?
No, he just said,
Uh,
it's sort of about like the scale, right? Like a bacterial intelligence is about the chemicals around it and its environment. And we get to ask questions like, are we happy and achieve those goals or not? Depending on.
whereas on a material scale, is the bacteria happy? That's not really a relevant answer. Is a working group happy? Well, okay, you can sort of is the general. I know the answer is always no.
Generally not, but it could be.
Yeah, exactly. But like it's not impossible.
I feel like that the SSI community, its collective intelligence IQ is going up.
Yeah.
There has been a.
Yeah, I know. It's gonna run away. No.
Okay, go ahead. Please. Come back. I'll come in.
Anybody
Well,
online?
like that, but
No,
in
no.
terms, there's been, and just in the last like 1 to 2 months, especially since IW in California, it's like certain things that like I never thought they would sort themselves out. There was like this inherent like long-term tensions between certain things, and I was like, I don't know this. And now like certain things just happen and they're like potentially gonna resolve themselves about like, it's all like data formats and signature stuff that's really, it's like deep technical politics that I thought was potentially unresolvable is resolving.
It sounds wonderful. Just why I jumped in and on a bit was, I'll try to be very brief, but the way that we met actually was through Tom Atlee. So I need to bring in Tom Atlee, and many of you who know me know I like to talk about Tom, and you know Tom maybe too, and about wisdom. So it has to do with being good for the whole. So the thing about the collective intelligence IQ or quotient, whatever, I actually went deeply into this for a few years, and so I came out with some kind of learning and experience. Coming back to this wisdom has to be good for the whole. So basically, the takeaway is collective intelligence in itself. It actually can be quite dangerous, evil, weaponized, etc. And so really also to try to be efficient with this theme and gathering, like we're trying to figure out, I think, what to do about not just humanity, but life itself, arguably, and then, sort of what I like to call, and many online have been part of this conversation about community gardening and wisdom gardening and so forth. So this just lenses for us to think about. Yeah. And do.
Richard wanted to say
Yes,
something.
thanks.
Somehow you preempted me now,
Excuse
but this discussion really put me to idle before, because the question that came to my mind, being happy, can that be a goal maximum in a moment? So then the question comes, what is life? Is life, so sorry for that, but you really brought me down to the ground.
Challenge Tom, sorry, that direct confident statement, I cannot be.
Well, I meant it then at that time, because also because I was doing these workshops, and I don't want people to think that you're dealing with a sentient being right now. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't know to what extent, at what point a neural network gets sophisticated that it wakes up and is conscious. Maybe the thing is already conscious. Some people think it is. I don't know. But Martina, just on your question, just as a gag, there's an app I use called Agent GPT, which is an autonomous agent where you give it just a goal and then it starts thinking of the steps. It works its way towards it, right? And it's not quite what you had in mind, because you have to give it the goal. And I said, how can we be happy? And it starts thinking, and it says, it added a task, identify what makes us personally happy. Task number 2, make time to engage in these things regularly. Task number 3, cultivate positive relationships with others. Task number 4, practice gratitude and mindfulness regularly, on and on. And so these things are getting more and more autonomous.
Absolutely, but this is like a guideline, right? But how do you measure it? I mean, you can argue, okay, you can everything quantify.
Should I ask how to measure it?
Oh, yeah.
We had the guys from Bhutan today, right? And they measure happiness, right?
Yes.
We could have upped them.
Something.
No, they actually have they have an alternative GDP measure that they
Which they
use
should
for the
have- they
whole
should.
economy.
Which we need desperately. We need alternative money
Yeah.
desperately.
Is everyone?
Because 15% of the US GDP is military.
Ooh, yeah.
And the other 30 is healthcare. So basically the output of the economy is 0 nearly.
Well, we're not caring for the health. Go ahead.
Is everyone familiar with the cliche saying about asking if an AI's intelligence is like asking, can a submarine swim? Right. So it's the wrong question to be asking. Does a submarine move through water though? Yeah, it does. Is that swimming? It doesn't matter. Like, is the AI intelligence? Maybe. But can it do stuff? Yeah. Should we pay attention? Yeah, we should pay attention. That's the important part, right? Like that's why we're here at this meetup.
I mean, I've so being helpfully popped up in my Skype and said, you can talk to our AI thing. And I actually have been using it to ask search engine questions and getting much happier, nicer answers back. Like, I'm going to Zurich, help me find a gluten-free restaurant. Like, I don't want to go through all the work of searching, like, and then I was like, great, can you find me 5 more options, right? Like,
yeah,
it's very, and then I have started to be like, I shouldn't ask it certain things, because if it knows what I'm asking, it knows more about, like, I could care less if it tells me restaurants, like, but I was thinking about asking it other things, and I was like, So how do we feel safe asking AIs questions that may be really personally revealing? People didn't really count on, in the beginning, Google saving all their searches and knowing so much about
Call
them.
a friend with another account. And
But it's the Google problem times.
Anyone in our
Yes,
studio?
you wanted to-
out there?
You
Oh,
want
yeah,
to
yeah.
say something?
So I wonder how much of ourselves we will be in 3 to 4 years when we begin to regularly use that, and when you automate these kind of questions or processes, because obviously you want to have this kind of convenience. So you don't want to ask the AI every time that you want to go to a city where the closest free restaurant is. You expect it to do it for you, and like there's some whole bunch of other things you kind of expected, and the more we kind of build these processes, the more we aim to be more productive. Then we give away more of ourselves.
Okay.
And this is kind of frightening.
Wait. But I want to provide a counterpoint to that. And both are valid. But like there's another way to think about it, which is maybe it can take care of the boring stuff and leave human stuff to us. Like like it can't enjoy gluten-free food, but I can. Let it find the stupid restaurant for me. I get to enjoy it. That's a very core human thing, right? Like going there and like hanging out there by myself or with friends, like that's very self.
The thing is that I could also mention at some point that when you say you have so much requests of people talking to you, because of whatever reason, that you say I kind of automate this kind of process, right? And then I'm actually the requests I'm getting, I'm not answering it myself, and maybe read them, maybe. But I provide information to people requesting, having questions about me, my work, or something I'm doing, and it's actually not me answering.
So I think, and a lot of people talk about that, right? That there's these AI twins out there that you'll be able to twin, you know, or to copy yourself and start doing the work for you. Then the question is, first of all, is that agent you or not? I think is one question. The thing I worry about this stuff is if there's the enhancement part, right? It's going to make us smarter, going to free me up to do really, really clever things, or it could have what I call the Google Map effect, right? Which is ever since Google Maps came out, right? I can't walk around the block without looking at the machine because I've gone dumb, you know, in terms of, you know, because it's doing it for me. So it's atrophy, right? I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think that could be
Sort of digital dementia.
digital dementia.
It's also maybe an atrophy of like what's happy for you or fun. If you take out all the boring stuff, then there's nothing to contrast.
Oh, sure.
I mean,
You're right.
so there's this other kind of.
My wife would agree with you 100%. No, she would.
Well, I think there's another challenge with AI, which I guess it gets to this Google Map problem, which I grew up without any cell phones, and I definitely learned how to read a map on paper
Right,
and how
I
to
remember those
navigate
days.
the world. And apparently the kids these days have no clue. And this is sort of like how, and then now we're gonna have kids like spend their whole lives like with like potentially ability using AIs to cheat and not learn how to write. Like how much is it gonna impact our cognitive capacities
Yes, exactly.
as children grow up with these functionalities?
They become dependent.
But we will sell digital detox sessions.
I think
We
we're
will sell digital detox.
I think we're sidetracking.
That parents have to pay.
I think we're sidetracking a little bit into like, you know, the very typical reactions to potential AI dangers. I think we're all aware of them. What can we do that's interesting? What can we do that's relevant to markets? Right? Like we got all these wonderful toys and these threads. Like what can we do?
Radical markets.
Radical markets. Yeah.
Anybody online want to
No.
take a shot?
Oh, hey, Mark, why don't you just say Michael, why don't you just say what you said?
Oh, hi, Michael.
Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you.
I love it.
I was really struck, you know, when Kaliya was talking about, you know, putting in the restaurant question and then thinking about what questions you ask. I mean, I've run into that in my use of AI too. It's like, I'm skeptical enough of the material I'm getting back to, you know, edit for hallucinations and, you know, biases based on data sets. But the fact that I'm feeding everything I'm doing into the AI is very concerning to me, both from eventual personal identification point of view, and also like, if I'm doing that, I know there's a lot of other people doing that with a lot of crap. And, you know, I'm putting up crap. But coming back to the idea of having our own retaken personal data as a model for ourselves that we can train on seems really like a great thing to be able to do, not just for the benefit that it gives us, you know, in privacy and ability to sort of like better know ourselves and better utilize the things that we've learned before but forgotten, or, you know, oh, where was I? Oh, you know, my AI knows, my personal AI knows where I was that day. That doesn't mean I want, you know, Microsoft's AI to know that. it also seems like it could be used for sort of watermarking purposes. I mean, if you could have your own data, everything you'd ever emitted, and like know what that was and decide what of it you want to release to be part of an AI, it also helps in terms of IP compensation and, you know, all kinds of things that should come into existence that you know, doesn't exist yet. Anyway, that's my
So,
thought.
so are you saying that theoretically a bot trained on all our stuff only could be used to authenticate us? Because it's like a not a fingerprint, but a
Yeah. I
brain
mean,
print.
you know, obviously that's an ideal. You know, that how simple that would be, and you know, what kind of duplication would exist, but certainly stuff that you knew that you put out that was very specific, like, you know, an article that you had written and was watermarked as yours and ended up part of somebody else's training set, you know, in terms of ideas for compensating photographers and illustrators for what comes out of models in their style, etc. There's something there. And it also lets potentially, I think, some weighting go on in other people's public models where you're able to say, this is identifiably from this expert and therefore a more useful part of a model to solve a problem than, you know, just the general writing on this subject that's pulled in by a larger model that's weighting like words that come in this sequence kind of equally.
Yeah, Michael, I 100% agree. And like, what's interesting is that listening to us talk about some of the stuff that we're really concerned about, a lot of it is we're less concerned about AI itself and more with who wields it, right? And like you said, we'd be a lot happier and a lot more trusting of these agents if they were in our control, or at least if they were working in our interests.
And then there's this question about them wielding themselves, and if their interests are aligned, right? So just to keep that in the mix, this is not only my concern.
That's a tough one. Okay, but if we, there will be people who say, okay, the improvement in productivity in myself and all the benefits overweigh the dangers, and say, okay, I'm going full in and I'm using it, and potentially they will be more productive, more competitive than other people who don't use it. So what we're creating is this kind of two-sided society where there's people who really make use of this stuff, who are really, really good at the topics what they're doing, and people who don't use it. And the people who don't use it might not be able really to participate in the conversation and the job market as compared to the other people.
Yeah, that's my biggest sort of real fear, is that the rewards of all this are going to be very unevenly distributed.
But that's in my personal view, extremely short-termism. I mean, this is like zooming out, everybody's like running off the edge of the cliff. So then, you know, what difference does it make anyway? Sorry, everybody who knows me knows I'm pretty cynical on this stuff, but
You mean
What do you
zooming
mean?
out like
What
the
do you mean?
environmental catastrophes we're facing?
yeah, I mean, depending on how far you zoom out, how much time do we have anyway? Maybe.
Which cliff?
There are many, that's the problem. There's at many scales, like billion-year sun burns out.
Yeah.
Like, that's a clip.
I'm thinking soon.
Sooner, yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right.
Well, do you think that there could be some positive implications then to AI? Do you think that could
He
help
does.
us
Well,
stay away from the cliff at least a little longer?
not
Can it keep
necessarily.
trained on everything we know
No, I
about
think-
climate? Can it propose some solutions possibly to that?
Oh, I have one. Grassland regeneration, which caused the last ice age, and the fact that it's not on the table at scale is really, really problematic.
What is
Okay.
it?
Grassland regeneration at scale.
Tom, after your AI tells us how to measure happiness, ask
So-
about grassland regeneration.
So what it, by the way, what it did, I don't know if it's an AI or a consulting company, it said, develop a measurement system. It said the happiness is based on the 4 F's, like family and friends and all this other stuff. And then it says, basically it said conduct a survey. And then it wrote Python code for a survey.
That could be grass-fed regenerative.
Well, I mean, just to quickly ground it back in sort of Radical Exchange, let's say Foundation, and also these other organizations that are also having these kind of conversations and maybe starting these initiatives around, for example, citizen assemblies around what the fuck to do, and you know, governance of the models and the data and so forth. I mean, just keep that frame here as well.
What do you mean? Deliberative processes around to manage?
Yeah,
AI?
so-
Starting now, yeah.
Yeah,
And it's-
so OpenAI in collaboration with the Collective Intelligence Project, which is yet another Radical Exchange cousin.
Yeah.
Led by Divya. They are Radical Exchange, not Radical. OpenAI has put up a $100,000 $100,000 grants that it will give away to applicants who apply to develop or experiment with different deliberative processes, broadly defined, to answer critical questions on generative AI and its accountability to democratic oversight.
I was just informed by some teammates of mine who have actually read the terms and conditions.
Yeah.
That there are some things to just look into
Not too-
in a very particular way, because like in terms of the IP, like the,
What's the IP?
yeah, exactly. So it's like, it's not gonna be so open,
What is it?
apparently. I didn't read that, but they just said you have to read it more carefully because there could be some potential concerns in there.
Let's be
The
honest,
IP for
OpenAI
what
is
the
not-
Not
process
so
is?
open.
Sorry?
I'm just trying to understand, like, what if we said we're gonna spend $100,000 and use open space technology to run a deliberative process?
But then,
What
you
do
know,
they own? Like,
no,
they
I
can't
think there
own open
there
space
could be some.
technology.
Data's going in.
no, they can't own open space technology. Like, which part of,
Maybe the outcome.
Maybe the outcome,
Yeah.
because you know how like when you sign up for work, most clauses are like anything you come up with while you're at the job, we own. So it's like that. It could be
so
like that. I
why
haven't
would
read
we
the.
do it then?
Yeah, it wouldn't be in their interest. That would get them.
I haven't read the, I'm just.
The
I haven't
PR
read it
perspective,
either.
Paul actually went into the questions you have to answer and pulled all the questions out into a Google Doc so we could answer them.
Probably fine.
Yeah, no, it's probably fine, but just, you know, just do
Mm,
look
well-
again if you're thinking about applying, which we will probably do. But my question is largely, how can we increase more of the deliberation about these matters? Because the worst thing here is the unknown unknowns. For example, you know, we're tasking the AI to do a certain thing. And by maximizing the good positive outcome, it could probably go at all lengths because it doesn't know otherwise. Because the human value system is not there, it will not try to do its best to adapt to certain human circumstances. If you read Nick Bostrom's example on paperclip,
Yeah.
so
Super intelligent.
the idea is, you know, if AI is given the task of producing as many paper clips as possible, and it's not given a certain limitations to that, it will just ruin everything to bring up the paper clips to life. And that means everything. So because we think it's so natural to be thinking about these matters and having these concerns, AI doesn't think that way. And so how do we train it so it doesn't have these unknown unknowns is a big question.
The Center of Humane Technology, they made a really good presentation about that. They came up with the attention economy, well, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. And recently, 2 months ago, had a presentation and talked about exactly these topics. And it's really one of the best content I watched about that, where they also mentioned this.
Yeah, another good one is by Daniel Schmachtenberger, a recent interview, 4-hour interview of the dangers of AI, which makes you think in a very, you know, it's like all the concerns that you might not be thinking about.
So
So
one on the superorganisms. This one?
no, that one. Yeah, there are a few, but definitely we should be thinking more in depth about all the sides of the potential concerns and have the public address it. Not just, you know, specific governments, specific corporations. We all are in charge of our potential future, for that matter.
So I found it interesting when we did our thing yesterday. And also here that this, you can't start a conversation on one part of AI, which you want to talk about identity, right? Without getting into the whole, without at least not right now.
But actually, Kaliya, maybe a question to you, how ready our identity infrastructure is for all of those concerns that we just touched on briefly? For some of those.
Well, I think, okay, in terms of getting very specific about things that are ready or very close to ready and like verging on like wide scale deployment, there's the content authenticity initiative and the open source code base that implements, which is, I believe, called C2PA. Those use decentralized identifiers for the media objects and for the entities that are asserting things in that ecosystem, and then verifiable credentials attached to them. And part of it was, it's been in progress for well over 5 years, and it's got involvement from civil society organizations. Primarily the one I know best is Witness, which does human rights documentation around the world, and also like Adobe is a major contributor because they want to be able to have like provenance chains for video and media. And so that they're also working with the hardware, the hardware devices that capture images, like camera makers, so that as soon as the media is generated, it gets persistent identifiers that then the transformations of that object. So you like download it and then you crop it and then you like do some Photoshop that isn't crazy manipulative. It just like makes some things lighter or darker so you can see it better, right? Like that the provenance chain that gets onto like a newspaper or a, you know, in digital media, you can go like, was that the real photo? And you could go find the original and go, okay, it's not actually like manipulated. It's just made to look pretty on the page or whatever, you know, and so that kind of thing is already on the cusp of helping us address one challenge, which is this image real or not, and where did it come from? Mm-hmm. So that's really positive. And I think in terms of like the peer-to-peer communication and are you talking to who you're talking to stuff, I think AI is going to accelerate interest in finishing those developments and pushing them out sooner rather than later. You've got DIDCOM as a peer-to-peer communication tool, the verifiable credential stuff in terms of like almost ready to be really deployed. Some governments are, you know, it's like, we're not in science experiment land anymore. We're like getting to like pilot and like, oh, we should hurry up those pilots because we need this faster than we expected kind of land. And I think also in terms of organizational identifiers, like who is signing this stuff? The work on trust registries has really accelerated, and the work that my colleague Lucy Yang has done on directories of trust registries. So it's one thing for a jurisdiction to manage a trust registry for, say, all the higher education institutions within its jurisdiction. But how do I find all the registries of higher education institutions in different jurisdictions? We need meta directories where you can at least locate the registries and then make your own trust decisions on whether you want to believe anything or accept the credentials from entities in those registries. And that's, I think, also gonna now accelerate more the clear need for this stuff to be working sooner rather than later. So is it like done? No. Is it like all like potentially of clear productions in sight? Yeah, like working production is kind of on the horizon and we can see it. And now I have to, how fast we get there, not totally clear, but we will get there.
So just to tag on to anyone who's sort of involved, especially this week here in Zurich, on the regulatory side of government and so on, sort of maybe similar question like readiness or emerging, I don't know, pros and cons, whatever, anything, any inputs there?
What do you mean by the regulatory side?
I guess nation states.
I can
Basically,
start.
guess what it-
Yeah.
I can start, right? So regulatory conversations are starting in the EU and the US. They're still at a crude level. We should pay attention. Not that I'm saying that we can, I don't know, make a huge difference to the US Congress or whatever, the EU Parliament, but the main danger at this point is uninformed and ham-handed policies, right? Like too knee-jerk or too restrictive. That's bad. We don't want that. We should keep an eye on that. But really, the conversation is just starting.
Yeah, I could just say I was encouraged just that as was said, the number of government representatives were here this week and stuck around to a good extent. And from what I picked up, it's sort of going in a good way, but it's a cumbersome process.
I can say something to that. Basically, in Switzerland, or I should start differently. In our discussion, we did also during these 3 days, we discussed a lot what is good or bad. And I, as a Jesuit educated person, I learned that's the wrong approach. And basically, I saw that in Silicon Valley, they are very Jesuit partially, because what they do is basically to design a picture of how we want to live, describe that as much as possible in detail. How do we feel a happy life should look like? And now in Switzerland, the legislation process, what the people explained is exactly that. Because in the first referendum, you try to capture the ingredients, then you present a first picture that is then evaluated by the law. Is basically this should describe a picture how the world should look like and work. And then this goes to Parliament, and then maybe the errors will be modified or some new errors come into it. But basically, that's what I learned in my life, and basically that's also what I understood from Einstein with his formula. If I can have, and his teachings partially, if I can draw a clear picture of how I want to see the world, and I design that picture as principles, my experience that I get exactly what I described, at least for me in my life. So what I can offer, if you're interested, I tried once to describe how SSI should look like in 2030.
Nice.
So I said, self-sovereign identity, also called decentralized digital identity, will be standard. Passwordless authentication and authorization will be secure and trusted. Trusted entities will issue verifiable credentials. That's paragraph 1. The second paragraph, a new balance between transparency and privacy will emerge and strengthen trust. People will be able to behave the same way digitally and responsibly in society as they can do today in the physical traditional world. Ethical adoption will happen globally. That's the second part. And the third part is designed as an exponential organization. Ricky Blue will enable everybody to use his creativity to increase wealth and monetize on it. New kinds of tribes may act like families.
Amen.
I refuse to become priest. They
said to do it.
No, that's great. I mean,
That's really good. I think
target
it's really
states are really.
I have no clue if this is a good picture. That was my thinking 1.5 years ago or a year ago. when I tried to describe that, and I invested quite a lot of time.
And you're absolutely right that it's important to have a picture is the key part here. Yeah.
And then this positive negative is only relative to the picture.
But we don't really have coherent picture of a positive AI future.
I don't
Do
heard
we?
any these days.
Well, okay.
All right, but let me ask a question. What would be? I suppose you could think about it, yeah.
Well, I mean, well, how high is your bar? I think no, but like curious. I think. Yeah.
Sorry, by coherent, I meant agreed upon.
Oh, agreed upon.
That's
harder.
That's what.
That's a good exercise. If it has not been done, maybe we should do it as humanity.
Are we, you know,
You can
the AI does all the work
small cells.
and we have all the fun?
Let's put it this way. I think we know that humanity doesn't agree on any one thing. Countries don't agree on any one thing. Cities, there's lots of tribes, there's lots of interest groups, there's lots of everything. So I think one really good state we can get to is if each of those groups can find and curate and raise AIs that act in its interests, right? Like, can we all agree on one thing? Yeah, probably not. But do we want, like, if a group of us agrees, we probably want an AI to help further that cause that we're agreed upon, right? Like,
But you see, I mean, that applies to all groups, good and bad. And I mean,
does,
international
it does.
terrorism
I
will
know,
also be using
I
the same
know,
approach. So
I
that's
know,
the
that's
bad part
bad.
of it. Yeah. In
That's-
fact, there's already a dark web trained AI solution,
Great.
which was just released, which is like
Wow,
all of the
really?
nightmares coming
Great.
true all in the one
Great.
place.
Yeah. Only a matter of time, right?
Yeah, it's already here.
So I noticed like 2 points which I connect now. The political power of deciding for something and the groups of people. When you think about lobbying, because you know politicians are doing something if lobbying is coming around and there's either to kind of to put a green light to develop and to just like this growth I run for all the industries doing all the things what's possible with private data, with not private data. And there is a pool which is kind of like behind their opposite to that one. How this pool could look like. And politicians, you know, kind of like the whole process of taking decisions on a political level is much slower than their product development, right?
Yeah.
So if you remember, I give you an example of that. Google started to kind of to parse all the data from location, from everything, like how we use the technology, and then AdBlogger comes along and they put kind of like certain brakes on this parsing through the technology. And this influence of this open source piece of software was much bigger than the political awareness and what people like thought but no.
Yeah, that's. I'm glad you said that. I wanted to put that on the table too. Is governments move slowly, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And laws move a bit slowly, but this stuff's moving so fast.
Yeah, and just the understanding too, and awareness, and the sort of learning curve of the policymakers. I mean, it's exactly part of that. Yeah.
Please let me maybe add something. What you just described is that Google, for instance, has this toothbrush test by Sergey. So this is exactly what I tried. This toothbrush test is the selection criteria to put a project into the picture, how they see the world, or to remove it from the picture. So I agree that Google is much faster in drawing that picture. But what I also saw, and even in Silicon Valley, and maybe you will be proof sooner or later, if a small group of people, like a startup or a foundation or an association, has a strong picture, the energy of the picture grows exponentially. So you can move big chunks of the world with a small group of people, because this will attract then automatic. That's what the goal is. The way is what the path is the goal, or that's basically what is meant with that. That if you can design the goal, the path will come automatically. You will meet all the people. The lobby will happen. We can even convince our Swiss government, which is partially already happening.
So I think what you're saying is conspiracies all the way down.
Yes.
I don't get it.
Along with the turtles.
Anyone out there? You're here.
Steve's comment, I can barely deal with my own learning curve. That's so true. Let alone worrying about the governments, but that's so true.
I will not try with SEC.
No.
At the moment.
Anybody out there?
We lost connection.
Welcome to speak.
There's some Italian theorist who points that 3 to 4% of the population
Really committed to change.
Oh,
It's sufficient.
maybe, okay, yeah, so 3 to 4% of the population committed to change is sufficient. Nice, nice.
Michael?
And that's much more than you need. You need only
Right.
0.9 to 1.6% to really initiate a big change.
Michael, you want to say something? Is that Michael?
I was just acknowledging or anybody out there by
Good, appreciate that.
no, I mean, you know, I think we're you know, singing from the same hymnal here.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, I have nothing to add at this moment.
Like I definitely want to do a call to action, right? Like if you're engineers, I highly recommend pull down some of the free and open source learning models and mess around with them. Literally point them at your document directory or at your poetry collection. I don't know. If you're an engineer, mess around with it. If you're not an engineer, I highly recommend try out more of these apps. Yes, you're getting data to Microsoft or whatever, but like learning curve is hard. We learn best by messing around. So try out these apps, watch videos, pay attention. Is the call to action.
My question in the round would be, what is the process which you currently use? Any AI tools?
That's great.
Or like your productivity workflow?
I have can I start? So like I was saying yesterday, so I've been using Calm stuff for last, you know, since March heavily, like daily. And I've discovered that it's GPT-4, right? It's not a search engine, right? It's not an encyclopedia. You don't go to it for information really, because you can't really trust it. It's brilliant at brainstorming. Okay. It's brilliant at you know, questions, answers, getting ideas. It's helped me very, very much in, you know, designing articles or coming up with ideas. And it's been very, very good. And I realized that it's not what you're doing with it, and this maybe gets into the data sovereignty thing, which we haven't talked about that much yet, is you're not going to it for information. You're having a conversation basically with the internet. In a sense, because with this collective, you know, data thing, and for that it's very, very good. You know, I had to write some pretty sophisticated stuff, and it comes up with good ideas. That's in my experience.
Well, I was saying that is the best question ever.
Yeah.
Like I love hearing how other people are using it. So I can't wait to hear. So actually, let's go around. Kaliya started a little bit explaining how she used ChatGPT in this trip even. So if I want to hear more, but like you're next.
So I run a Twitter channel. It's called SSI Ambassador, and I post a lot about SSI content. So if you will write an article, then I will post it, more or less. Especially if it's an identity newsletter.
Yeah.
The thing is that there's so much to read.
Yeah.
I cannot do it. Right, it's way too much. So I used to do it with myself and like reading the article, summarizing it myself, putting in a tweet. And no chance I can do it anymore. So what I came up with, I basically use and it's a extension of ChatGPT which can has access to the internet. So I posted a link and I constructed a template like an instruction which is like half a page long, really detailed what I want. I'll also give it an example how it should look like, in which tone I wrote, what it should not do, what it should do, and I just post the source, the article, and I basically paste always the same instruction, and it's absolutely incredible because it also finds Twitter handles, for example. And obviously I have to read through it to make sure that this is not bullshit, but it's pretty good, the outcome. And what I do, I put it in a scheduling tool, a social media scheduling tool, and I have like 7 to 8 social media channels I run. So that's what I do, like once a week. I just summarize everything, put it in, put it out, and it takes me like 1.5 hours. But otherwise, it would take me maybe 1 day.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool.
What's your Twitter handle?
First, I will advice talk.
Yeah, do it.
So what we do, we kind of like without technology, you can do everything around built industry. So you can design, build, and utilize spaces. But what we're doing now is it's a first application with it's a chatbot, which is based now on Telegram. Those architecture rent.
Say it again?
Architecture rent, where you basically can just like book spaces at like any space, like hotels or whatever. Anyone, so it works like that. So you start a chatbot, so there is kind of like I want the rent. It's very basic prototype, right? So we experiment on that, and you can do like a reservation on residential parking, boats, whatever, and it goes with the address. So anyone, so it works only in Switzerland. Anyone wants to give me an address, any address?
Like, where to go? What?
Yeah, like, okay, we're basically here, we came up somehow with a rental contract or with a contract for space
You
possession.
want an address?
Yeah, like
This one.
You summarize it. You
Yeah.
can tell what it does. Like,
okay, like
Like Königsstraße,
just,
let's say.
yeah, we just like I just like put my address there. And then you basically have data to this building, like what building area it is, like what kind of apartment it is. So we're passing all the data, like all the public data and all. And then so what we can do is like kind of like boring to go with the data. And so what we put this data to ChatGPT, and we let it to kind of to tell a story about the building. Basically, so it's kind of like an architectural guide or a source of truth.
Michael.
You know, in all this emo stuff, you read something, but you can trust. So here's the story based on the real data, kind of like a real story for normal people handling data. And like so this kind of
okay, so that sounds really cool. But you're not answering the question technically. Have you personally used ChatGPT?
So basically, I'm a co-developer of this one. This is
and so as a developer, you do have to like learn it and use it a lot.
But yeah, so I use it from you know from my coding exercises until like using it like if you see my history, it's kind of like so it translates and some code or
Nice.
but also like some philosophical question on space utilization, because people like we forget this part of architecture where we actually design for some utilization, so just get out of it. We don't think about that. This is a part we address. So I'm also kind of like discussing with him on some papers and some stuff. With this stuff, and if you ask like what kind of data could be available for kind of like for happiness, so if you address it to the biologists, and kind of like if we take our health data, so heart rate, can we tell?
I would love to give my health data to ChatGPT.
Michael, you have
Yeah, this is actually not a thing which I know some startups which are solving this problem on the privacy of data.
Good. Okay.
Okay.
Michael.
I actually had my hand up from when we were talking about like what we could do to, you know, I mean, you were saying developers could do this, the general public can, you know, just try using the tools, but I also feel like we need to do a lot of communicating, whether, you know, developers or not, those of us who are thinking about this need to do a better job.
Oh, you froze.
Oh no,
Just
muted.
You just muted.
You muted
Oh,
yourself.
sorry.
You're back.
Good job.
You need to do a better job of like telling simple stories of how, you know, what models could be. I mean, talking about, I do think the idea of imagining the difference for average people to understand the difference between them having their own AI, not that they can right now, and AI being on somebody else's cloud, you know, just like those differences between I am going to Facebook and they are like sucking my data versus I am doing something in a decentralized way that people are just starting to learn and understand. We need to talk more about AI and, you know, tell some stories about it. And then in the how are you using AI piece, I put in the chat Mark Andreessen's essay on how AI will change the world, will save the world, was so annoying and such a straw manning. And he kept using this metaphor of Prohibition era Baptists and bootleggers, that, you know, all the people who were opposed were Baptists and bootleggers. That I asked ChatGPT to rewrite the essay as how alcohol will save the world.
Yes.
Have him ranting about, you know, if everybody would just, you know, things would be so much better if we were just all a little bit drunk all the time. And
Okay. So like, this is funny, but look at what you're actually doing. You're like, ChatGPT, write a spicy essay for me, and it did.
yeah,
Like, that's remarkable.
I mean, I needed to insert a few jokes into it, and I'm still not sure if I'm going to publish it or not. But there's some good stuff about, you know, how the Chinese are going to like have us all drinking Tsingtao, and, you know, do we really want that as American Budweiser drinkers?
Nice.
All right.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's but we're still on the.
Oh, okay.
It's just the TV.
Wait, the TV turned off?
Yeah, it's got like the timer thing. Okay, your turn.
I
Oh,
turned
it's
about
back
what?
on.
Oh,
So-
we're going around the circle,
so
saying
I
how do we use
Perfect.
Yeah.
I don't.
legit?
However,
So legit.
Well, okay, so this is I mean, thanks for, you know, putting me on the spot about this, because as Tom knows, because Tom was starting to, well, as he described, you know, do some workshops and got very involved, and we're having some like great conversations, and he invited me to, well, actually one in-person workshop here in Zurich, which I ended up declining because I didn't want to give my phone number to OpenAI. So that's number one. And then, you know, and so I didn't set it on the account actually. But I also, as I've spoken with some of you, you know, I can't claim to be or afford to be a purist in the sense of, you know, I love, you know, language transcription. For years. I kind of rely on it in a lot of sense making and all this. So, and then to bring in Noam Chomsky and what he calls the snowplow type of AI tools, you know, that are just, they're functional. You don't want or need to get rid of them because they clear the snow or whatever. And so where do you really draw the line, though, is a question. And then this whole generative stuff is another kind of beast, if you will, entirely. So that's kind of my bit there. I'm not directly engaging, but I'm absolutely fascinated, disgusted, and looking over a lot of people's shoulders.
Nice. So that I was like that for a long time, until a couple of months ago. So I'm a cynical, cranky engineer. And
That's kind.
if you've noticed, a lot of engineers are terrible users in the sense of they don't trust software, they don't want to try new things. I'm certainly one of those. And so like for the longest time, I didn't want to try out ChatGPT for various reasons. Part of it to keep an eye on it, and part of it just out of sheer curiosity. I've started using it, and so far I'm just asking dumb questions to it, as in like kind of like what Kaliya was saying. Like the other day, I was reading the news, thinking about political unrest in the US. So I'm like, oh, I know, I'll ask ChatGPT. ChatGPT, I'm afraid of political unrest. Do you have any advice for me? And like, it gave me advice, right? So just like dumb stuff like that. Or my girlfriend was like, I want to learn a new language, but this app that I'm using doesn't teach me any grammar. She's like, I'm a classic scholar. Like, I want to learn grammar. So I'm like, oh, I know. Let's ask ChatGPT. I'm like, ChatGPT, I'm learning a language, but this app that I'm using is not teaching me grammar. Can you recommend me some apps that start out with, like a more theoretical background rather than conversation? And it did. And when I was asking it, I knew that I could do this later. I could go through, I could pull up a list of language apps, and then I could evaluate each one. But like, I was feeling lazy.
Oh, wow.
And it gave me some really good options that I'm like, okay, great. Now I'll double check them in case it's hallucinating. Right now I can actually try them. And so I kind of use it for the hell of it and as a labor saving device.
Yeah.
But I'm also trying to start learning how to code with it. So that's, and I'm working out my courage to turn it on the code editor level. Right, like in the IDE, in the integrated development environment, the stupid Microsoft Copilot that is trained on all of our GitHub open source data, which I disapprove of, but I want to try and see what it's like. But I haven't gotten the courage there yet. So, what about you?
I'm very much in your corners. So I'm not using it extensively. What I try to do is more like a maybe researchy kind of playing around with it. So just for fun, copying some pieces of text into it and telling it, hey, rewrite this text for an audience of experts in this and that field. Yep. I want to have a speech, 5 minutes, something like that. And then I see what it does with it, because then I can also kind of verify because I know what it got.
What do you think? What do
you need? I mean, I really think it's nice, or it can be helpful or supportive for this kind of interaction with it, but you need to double check. So, because if you have like a small paragraph and you say, okay, you want, I don't know, a text of 2,500 words, let's say, then it blows it up. So it puts some own or whatever intelligent information into it, and so you need to double check whether it's correct, whether it makes sense, whether it's coherent. But I think this is a nice use of it to just like enhance, or maybe not enhance, but adapt things that are already there, that you know that either you did them or you took them from a source that you know, and I think that's fun. So you can create your own stories as well.
Yeah.
I have a few use cases since I'm convening a lot of people for events and workshops. I would tend to ask GPT chat, who are the top people in this and that, like who are the top people in civilizational design, who are the two people in the answers are even funnier than this. Sometimes, well, it's never the top people, that's for sure. But some people already know. So it gives you like people who are a bit more unconventional, who are still valid, or it gives you imaginary people. And that is like makes you giggle. It's like people who don't exist, or like the titles are messed up. So that's one. Number two, Midjourney is huge. And Midjourney, like if you're not a professional designer, but you want to do design. So all of those sleepless nights with Midjourney, super cool stuff, and it's actually super user friendly. It's easy to use. And then just general stuff. I tend to ask a philosophical question.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Do you like some of the answers?
No, could get better, but I think it's well on track.
You ever try to, when I have fun, ask it what it knows about you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And was it good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Whoa, I want to do that. That's great.
Have you not done it?
No.
But you cannot
So-
share that it's the same that you.
I mean, at least see if it's accurate, right? Like,
Positive hallucination.
yeah, no, I want to know, Okay, go ahead.
I think we'll go on the run and then we'll call it a.
Yeah.
I think my approach is ambiguous in the sense that I don't use any AI tool for the projects I'm doing. Try really to use my brain. But on the other side, in '84, I studied artificial intelligence, worked, built parking space allocation at the airport through first neural network.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and Forex trading with artificial intelligence. And I also, with a colleague, he used ChatGPT to improve a business plan and the product presentation. And some of the results are quite interesting and some are simply bullshit. And what we try to do is to find, basically we try to generate a list of wallets and technologies out of ChatGPT, but that was a mess.
Well, because it's 2 years out of date.
Yeah, because
I'm gonna do it. Oh, that sounds like a good idea.
2 years ago.
I know.
I'm tired of reading research papers by well-meaning graduate students writing about dead projects.
I don't know what
that's
to
all
say.
ChatGPT would do.
I'm curious.
Oh.
That happened in 2 years.
Jörg, have you been using it?
Not really,
Legit,
but I will use it for certain purposes.
legit.
So, who on the,
Yeah, who else wants to share?
in the Zoom world would like to share what they're using it for, if anything? Like use case
I
stories?
just have a quick comment while someone's going to step up, but I've seen excessive, like it produces a high volume of stuff that it takes. I mean, I haven't needed or wanted to edit personally myself, but I kind of pity the people that have to go through and edit a lot of this because it's just like repeating a lot of things, like sort of in this classic essay format, and it's like you can see it right away.
You just ask it to edit. Just be like, edit.
Well, anyway, it's just an observation.
Somebody described it as a talented intern, right? You have to
Yeah.
fix this or that and everything.
I mean, it seems like it's better at summarizing than it is at making large amounts of text out of small things.
I agree.
Okay,
That's been my, like I said, I don't use it to write. I use it to figure out.
yeah.
Anybody else?
You out there?
I'm also curious to get people's experiences or feedback on how the hybrid format was. Sorry.
Also, Ray, I see you there. I don't know if you.
They're talking.
Go ahead.
Hi. Somebody else was going to say something.
No, go ahead, Mike.
Okay. I have used it a lot for just kickstarting, just writing like from bullet points. It's just really, I'm somebody who suffers from kind of writer's block, so just getting stuff in there and then using it to generate stuff seems useful. And then using, I've used in a horrified way DALL-E and I'm a designer by background, and the things that I've seen, I was sort of provoking it, trying to generate work like, you know, show me insert name of copyrighted character in the style of insert name of living illustrator who I know, you know, does work, and the quality of what it generates is not great, but it's enough to satisfy some people and be a substitute illustration. And that's really disturbing to me, you know. It just, yeah, I mean, the IP that's going unrewarded because all this information was sucked up, it really sucks.
Makes sense.
The other Michael maybe, or Juan wrote, he uses it mostly to extract summaries and keywords, which I think is a very good thing to do with it.
I did start to call out Ray. I don't know if you're comfortable or ready to speak at all, but I know you've been immersing yourself in a lot of research and other aspects of all this. So if you have anything to.
And he lasted almost 2 hours.
Oh, and also following on your written input on the PDCs, if you have any comments there could relate to AI or other.
Sure. Thank you, Charles. So experiments that I have done are many. One of the more interesting ones for me, at least, was just taking like a collection of ebooks and papers, several thousand of them that I have for research that I've done, and comparing, iterating through, like, you know, inquiry against like a full text index that's just a very old, simple indexing tool that you would see in like a corporate file management system, versus trying to write a plain language query in AI and iterate around that. And for me, I like the simple full text search better, because I have some sense already of where the information I want is going to be, and I can go to the sources and find it, versus querying AI and then, you know, having to figure out how to make it show me where that was really, or did it just string together things because the embeddings looked good, but it's completely a non sequitur, so it's effectively hallucinating. Mostly though, my work has been around trying to figure out like various ways to use AI for good, and what sort of affordances would we want to define in. It seems that there's an enormous amount of focus on the harms and the risks and mitigating things around the hallucination and the discrimination and the lack of inclusiveness and all the biases, but very little discussion about, you know, what really is this tool best for. And I'm convinced that it will end up being, you know, to make specialized AIs with affordances that help us to make ourselves and each other better.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really where my effort is at, is thinking about like, how does this fit in? How do we stop anthropomorphizing it and thinking about it as something that's going to take away jobs and take away employment, and simply think of it as like a very narrowly defined specific tool that we understand that it is just a tool, and we design the tool the way that we should design all of our systems, which is simply to bring out the best in us, to make people more pro-social, to make it easier for cooperation to occur and collaboration and resolution of large scale and even global problems, because we shape ourselves with our tools rather than rely on them to do our thinking for us.
Thank you. Any tie-in with the purpose-driven contract? I don't know, that's maybe a stretch, but since you wrote about it a little bit on the chat, if there's a connection.
You know, it's still a work in progress. Like, have a increasingly better idea of how to do it, and you know, in discussions with about 10 people about how to implement, and really still figuring out like what code exists that we can already use and what are we going to have to build from scratch. So we're like at the very beginnings of like designing the requirements and figuring out how to architect what we're building.
Great, thanks.
That's very cool. Yeah.
Hey. Hi.
Hi, Michael.
I missed out the beginning. I'm not sure what the context was it whether it was around digital identity or AI, but I guess everything, yeah. But I guess my point is like the thing about what Ray was saying about how do we make this like work for the greater good or whatever. I guess it's about for me, how do we bring it back to the local, like the hyper local, like the people around you that you trust, that you can verify, and connect into a DAO, and like bring that power of blockchain into the mix. So I mean, that's how we create privacy, is through the fact that we trust each other's identity and we can verify each other. We can, create citizen NFTs, whatever the thing is, the digital identity is. Yeah, anyhow, that's kind of along the lines that I'm thinking.
Thanks. All right. I think we're slowly but surely. I mean, I didn't think we'd get this long. It's great. It's been 2 hours. It's been a fantastic conversation.
How the hybrid format been?
Yeah, I'm curious, how has the hybrid format been? I just started for the first time.
Reasonable experience out there?
Let's see. Michael says, we can see names on the online participants. I wish I could see the names of the folks in the room.
Oh yeah, see a little facial recognition, a little giving.
No, seriously, so like nameplates or something, or just.
I don't know how it would work. I mean, I was looking back at the list of participants on the event site to see if I could correlate who was who, but I wasn't really. I couldn't really be sure.
Say our names.
Yeah, we could also.
We could say our names before we started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, for future augmentation, the floating name tags that are virtually inserted in your space. I'll be able to do that with my my Apple Vision Pros.
Yeah.
Where are names?
All right. Well, I think
closing remarks. Yeah.
Actually, the one other thing I would say for on the hybrid front was I could hear almost everybody, but the folks like Charles, you were a little bit hard to hear. Just I don't know what your distance from the mic is, but other than that, it worked pretty well. Sorry.
Yeah, the mic's here, so it's a bit. I mean, I had it on
It's an Omni.
but
Okay, cool.
All right. Well, listen. Thanks. First of all, to you, Kaliya, for agreeing and putting yourself through this. Dimitri for showing up.
Hey, thanks for having us. This is super fun.
Thanks for everybody. I didn't think that we have so many people in person. It's fantastic. Thank you all. Thank you all, especially you, the 5 of you who made it all the way through. God bless you. That's fantastic. And
thanks to you, Tom.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That's been a bit very effective.
Charles as well, who's been
Great.
and so I'm going to keep trying to do it hybrid going forward. And so even though if you're not in Switzerland, feel free.
Do you guys only do Zurich? Or do you, are you open to other Swiss?
Isn't it Swiss?
It is Swiss RFP, but since I'm here, it's a bit, but no, because when we started the second
Especially if
iteration.
somebody interesting comes along.
Yeah. when we started this second iteration of the chapter, it was still COVID-ish times, and so we started online.
Hmm,
And that's why I've got 170 people in the group, but most of them are not even in Switzerland.
got it, okay.
So, but hey, you
You'll
got
be
it.
informed, everybody.
Super cool. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. It's great.
Bye.
The important question. What do we do?